This is A Story of Sorts, the podcast mostly about bookish stuff. Hello everyone, Karina here. On this episode, I chat with Kira Leah about their debut sci-fi novel Constelis Voss and about queer representation in media. Have a listen. Kira, welcome to A Story of Sorts.
Thanks for having me.
Tell us a bit about yourself.
Sure. I'm a 33-year-old weeby, nerdy freelancer living in Rhode Island, a bi-trans dude, elder queer, again, a weeb, video gamer, author, and transitioning currently out of freelance life into full authorship.
Yeah. Sounds exciting.
It is. It's been hard, but it's exciting. Yeah.
Constelis Voss, number one. Am I saying it right? Constelis
Yes,
Voss?
you are.
Yeah. Number one, Color Theory is your debut science fiction novel. Would you like to reveal a bit about the plot to us?
Sure. Little difficult since it's a bit meta, but basically in a super absurd, hyper dystopic future where humanity is low-key already blown itself up a couple times. Some smart and or possibly not smart person decides, well, all our robots are breaking down and life is kind of terrible. We have a weird process or system that we can put into one of them to fix it because it's the only war machine we have left and we don't know what to do. So because this is absurdist sci-fi, kind of like Brazil almost, the film, they do it and, they don't really think about the consequences. And now you have Alex, a bi-trans criminal from the 90s, showing up in the hyper future being like, wow, shit's messed up. Maybe we should fix it. That's a basic premise, is what happens if you take somebody from way in the past and you go, hey, how are you going to deal with the dystopic future? And how they deal with it is very bonkers, very fun, and more meta and multi-layered than I think possibly many readers will pick up on.
I must admit that I am terrible at reading science fiction because science fiction and fantasy is what I read the least. Really like the writing, but I'm still trying to figure out a few things.
Sure.
Because, like I said, it's. I was actually talking with someone at work the other day. Sometimes it's you can understand the world and what is going on, but explaining to others what it is about, that's sometimes what's complicated.
Do you mean as a reader or like an author? Or both?
As a reader. Like for me, when I read sci-fi, because I don't read a lot of sci-fi. And when I do, it's mostly this topic.
Yeah, I mean, it's even hard to just encapsulate in general. Like, it's science fiction. I could just say, like, buy robots and face punch dictator, but that's only half of, not even a quarter of it. Since a lot of science fiction gets into, existentialism, what does it mean to be a person, social issues and politics. Sometimes the science fiction stories end up being far more about the stuff that's being thought about and far less about the stuff that's happening. And the stuff that's happening could just be pew pew laser guns.
Yeah.
So it's hard to kind of describe sci-fi. It's my favorite genre, but it can be kind of difficult to hash it out also because if it's a certain flavor of science fiction, explaining it is gonna sound bonkers. It just is. It's like the Buffy Farscape Star Trek thing where you're like, I don't know how to explain this. Like,
just
don't ask me. Yeah, like they're clones, maybe. Like, it's a little too hard sometimes.
What is the meaning of the title? How did you come up with it?
That's a spoiler. Yeah.
All right. So we're gonna.
I could just say it. So, crap. Do I want to?
You don't have to. We can just leave it.
Okay, I'll just offer something. As someone who is hugely obsessed with symbolism and multi-layered work, the name of things means stuff. So it's not just like a pulled fake word out of thin air. It doesn't necessarily relate to our real waking life, but it relates to the content of the trilogy itself. So I'm hoping savvy readers will be like, I wonder why the spaceship is named Constelis Voss and what's the trilogy's name? I don't get it. And then sit for a second and think, what type of word is the word Voss? Not like the water brand. Like, where are its origins? It's a Germanic last name. What does it mean? So yeah.
I'm
So
in
I'm
the
yeah.
Netherlands. I'm Portuguese.
Yeah.
I live in the Netherlands, and yeah, it is very similar to. Maybe I don't want to say it. Maybe I'll just let people research it, and then I will
Yes.
research it myself to see if I'm correct.
Yeah. I mean, I kind of do that thing where I don't know. I'm an insufferable artist where I'm like, here's symbols. Have fun. Go figure it out. And some people hate that, but I freaking love it. And I'm like, oh, awesome. It's like a treasure hunt. But yeah, I'd rather people go and research and have fun with it because art's a conversation, at least to me. I don't want to just tell a story. I want people to be like, wow, what does it mean? Because I don't know, it's fun. It's treasure hunt.
It is fun, especially when like you have a lot of people like reading a book and then some people years later still figuring out stuff that nobody figured
Yeah.
out before, and it's usually everything. It's so you do say symbology in English as well? It's all
Yeah, I say
symbols.
yeah. Yeah.
So okay, so I'll leave it to people. I'll search it at the end as well. What about how the story come to you? Like, how did you come up with? Do you remember? Do you remember like a moment or a few moments when the story started to take shape in your mind?
Yeah. So I'm a big nerd and I run or did run D&D-esque form role-playing games where like I'd be like the GM and be like, here's the plot. And then we'd all make characters and write a big story. Originally, Constelis Voss was at least the fetal prototype of it was something called Fortuna Prime, and I wrote it with a buttload of friends, and it was super fun. And then it died, and then I was like, I really like this story. I like this idea of this like laissez-faire concept of we're just going to throw some 80s 90s kids in the future and see what the heck happens. And I like the social issues and topics. So I've been more or less kind of on and off writing this for a very long time. The characters are at least 10 years old themselves.
Mm-hmm.
And then COVID hit. And I was like, maybe I should try to publish this versus just keeping it in Google Docs. Because I don't know. A, it's fun. B, I think it's timely and necessary. And C, like, why not have more fun sci-fi? Like, why not do it? So
Yep.
it kind of just comes out of nerdy interest and going, well, I like this idea enough to keep it. I should see how far I can take it. And then it ended up kind of taking on social issues at the time. It ended up taking on even stuff that I dealt with in my past and became, at least in my eyes, a very difficult triumph of trying to balance both fun sci-fi pew pew lasers and also really big beefy concepts while not making it annoying about it. Yeah.
That's a curious thing because I think people who are made annoyed by that, they're maybe not very interested in learning and bettering themselves, you know? Right? Like if you are
Yeah.
annoyed, but I do understand where you're going because a
Yeah.
lot of people's like, oh,
Like,
you're putting meaning about this or that in everything. Like you're including, let's say, I don't know,
yeah.
LGBTQIAP plus issues in everything, and you're just making it happen when it's not there because they don't want to see it and they don't want
Yeah.
to learn. Like they don't want to have the work and do the work.
Yeah. And it's not even like it's work. Like, I kind of think it's bonkers. Like, science fiction has always kind of been out there about social issues. It's kind of also always been out there about gender and identity, like aliens and stuff. Like, it's always had this. Like,
Yep.
I grew up on Star Trek Deep Space Nine. It's one of my favorite shows. Farscape too. And I'm much more inspired by television than writing, which is probably bad. But sci-fi has always been like this. It's always been political. I don't know. Writing this, I haven't really gotten a lot of pushback, but I'm sure in the future I will. And they'll be like, but why all the politics though? And I'm like, why not the politics though? I don't know, you guys. I don't like burying my head in the sand and pretending stuff doesn't happen. And if you guys want escapism, you can go read like popcorn novels. Like, I'm not about that life.
No, but
It's
it's
fun though. Like,
uh,
I don't mean to cut you off. It's fun though, but that was that tightrope walk of let's still make it fun while being political. But
yeah.
I like to think when I read.
No, but it's also curious because a lot of people tell artists to stay out of politics. Maybe not so much writers, since writers write so many, books are sort of fight in a sense. They have always been. But you find many people telling, for example, Bruce Springsteen not to mess with politics when like one of his, maybe I don't know, maybe the first one of his first hits worldwide was, I was going to say Born in the USA, but I don't even know. Yeah, Born in the USA,
Yes.
right? Have you kind of ask people, have you listened to the lyrics, or are you just listening to the melody?
Yeah,
So
the
yeah,
answer is they don't have an attachment to that art in terms of the politics behind it. They don't do research on it. And then they, say stuff like that, or to use a goofy video game
yeah,
comparison, they're like, Final Fantasy VII isn't political. It's about eco-terrorists and evil corporations. It
yeah,
is political. I don't know what you guys talk about. Um, but yeah, it's frustrating because you don't necessarily have to be in love with the politics or fan of the politics, but most art, most of it has something to do with even the politics of living.
mhm,
So if people want to avoid that in their media, they probably just shouldn't engage with media, period.
yeah. Agree. Yeah, like I said, I think a lot of people talk about cancel culture, and I think people who are afraid of cancel culture are people who definitely are not engaged in social justice, because actual cancel culture, I don't think it exists unless it was, as I said before, to someone else, like the what's their name, the Chicks, like the singers, the American singers,
The
that
Dixie
the
Chicks?
Dixie Chicks, yeah, because they basically got canceled for saying something that happened and it was true against the president. So people, so in that case, maybe you can consider that they got canceled. But yeah, in most instances, I think it's just consequences for what they said or done.
Yeah, probably for most cases.
Yeah.
But there is a recent case with an author known as Isabel Fall who released a short story. I don't know if you're familiar with it,
No.
but because people couldn't really guess Isabel Fall's intents, and she used the title for the short story. She referred to a transphobic meme to kind of lampoon it, work through it, engage with it. A lot of people assumed that she was just a cis guy, but really she was a trans woman. So that's a
Mhm.
case of, I don't want to start a big old debate on it, but I think cancel culture is definitely real. As a leftist, I'm super leftist. I think it mostly is consequences, like people being held to the consequence of their actions or their words.
Mhm.
Sometimes we get a little too aggressive with it and end up hurting marginalized people.
Mhm.
So I think we have to be really careful about that. Maybe assume good faith and then do research. And if you can't get information, then don't make a judgment call. People are a little too quick to judge stuff without understanding it.
Yeah, definitely. That's also true. And if you're on Twitter, you are going to see a lot of stuff, especially if you're on
Uh,
publishing and author Twitter.
yeah,
and
yeah,
and it is
definitely.
true. Marginalized authors usually get the blunt of it always. So
Yeah. Yeah, it's weird to think that the art and writing of marginalized people kind of gets held to a standard that monoculture authors don't really. And I think
mhm.
that's super weird personally. I think it's
Yeah.
strange, you know?
Yeah, no, totally understand it. It's the same with actually I think we're going to get there at some point in this interview about like the standards. You don't have like, you have loads of literature or yeah books about heterosexual relationships, and you allow those books to be problematic in a large scale because there are so many, and then suddenly there are yeah, queer books, and if something is slightly problematic, then people are immediately just like, oh, this, like any value this book could have it just doesn't. And it's like
Yeah.
give people a chance, because there isn't enough literature, there aren't enough books about queer people, or not as many as white authors and cis people. So, just give
Yeah,
people
yeah.
space to grow.
Yeah, I think we need to get to open representation personally. I don't want to jump the gun on the questions, but I think we have to get to the point where like a lot of different people are allowed to make a lot of different work,
Mhm.
or
Yeah.
like a lot of different work. In Constelis Voss, there is queer rep, everybody's bi, Vox is gender apathetic more or less. Alex is a trans dude, but they're all robots, so that's like a part of the equation. But cyberpunk is very much a trans or gender nonconforming thing. But I definitely have queer relationships in the series that are not necessarily the most healthy relationships. And I definitely had feedback early on writing this. People were like, why the MLM rep bad? And I was like, well, I've been in bad relationships with guys and I'm a trans dude. I guess I can't talk about that now because you guys are mad at me. So yeah, the two behind me, I
Yeah.
have a picture of Alex and Olive, and they're the titular eventual couple and kind of the forever pairing. And just because she's a cis girl little gremlin and he's, they're both bi, and I still think that counts. And they're, to me, a really warm, loving, supportive, healthy relationship. So yeah, it's super weird to be a queer author and be like, yes, so I wrote stuff, and people are like, but it's not the stuff I want, and I'm big mad. And I'm like, okay, but that's kind of a part of my life. Like a lot of my life is in this trilogy. So why are you telling my life is problematic? It's weird, right?
Yeah, no, absolutely, of course. Going back to the book, I was going to ask, without, if you can, without a lot of spoilers, which scene in the book gave you more pleasure to write?
Just the first one or all of them? Like my favorite thing to write.
Maybe of all of them, because
Okay.
the second one is going to be out when?
Second one is going to be out tomorrow, actually.
Oh,
Yeah, Tuesday
okay.
tomorrow.
I did not know that, because it's already the second one in a year.
Yeah. Yeah, we're
Are
just
they?
trying to get them all out.
Yeah, but are you? Is it going to be like three of them this year?
Yes. Yes.
Wow, that's a lot of work. Yeah, okay. So
Yeah.
yeah.
I mean, I also have prequel novels I'm writing, and there's going to be 7 of them. They're not all going to be out this year, but definitely one of them will be a bit prolific. To go back to your question, favorite scene, gosh, there's a scene where Polly, the unfairly maligned, stereotypical kind of valley girl, and Henry, like the himbo, are running around on a level in the big old planet-sized ship that's just like full of green and full of trees and full of wheat and flowers. And I thought it was really a beautiful way to showcase their budding relationship and also who they were inside in the past, because we deal a little bit with timey-wimey stuff. It was lovely writing a gorgeous landscape of blistering flowers and shining gold, and writing characters being happy when a good chunk of the story is just chaos, anxiety, shooting, pew pew laser gun, a lot of existentialism. So having a moment where they're just like running through fields, and Polly has never seen anything like this before because she was on a level of the planet-sized ship that doesn't, like, she's not allowed to go anywhere. She can't do anything. She can't have any fun. Like, she can't have a life. She gets to see something she's never seen before, and it's a whole field of golden wheat. And I just thought it was really beautiful.
That's book one. Because
Probably,
yeah, because I
yes.
remember that scene.
That's nice. It's nice,
Yeah.
feeling nature, and like imagine living your super future life, and you're just kind of in a little box of a cubicle. You don't get to do anything, and then you see the sky. Like
Yeah.
that must blow your mind.
But
And I thought it was
I do also think that there is, there can be amazement even when you have taken those things for granted. And then at some point, and yeah, that scene is a bit like that. Like, of course, I know what it feels like. I see it every day. But sometimes it kind of takes a moment for you to appreciate it. and to see it again, with actually observe it.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I grew up in the super boonies. We're talking like water lilies, swans, like tree frogs, tons of flowers, like very woodsy. And you kind of dislike it when you're a kid. You get older, you move to the city, and you're like, man, when was the last time I dug my feet in the dirt? And that's been forever. So I agree with you. You can be surrounded in nature, but taking time to appreciate just the beautiful things in your life, it's really great doing that and also writing that.
And do you have a favorite character and a character you identify the most with? They can be the same, of course.
It's hard. On different days, it's probably identify with different characters. My favorite is Diana because I think she's just hilarious. But I obviously personally identify with Alex because I low-key wrote him for years pretending I was not a trans dude. Like I was like, yeah, this is just my silly, aggressive, loud stories with this dude. It's not anything real. Yeah, it is a journey of coming out through writing a character. But Diana's my favorite. I just think she's hilarious. You know, it's something about that like erudite, like, oh dear, like, oh darling. And then the next moment being like she has a whole facade where she puts on this princess act, but she's really just as crass as everybody else. And I find that funny. She has all of, you know, Alex's persnickety performanceness, and even some of his venom, but none of his baggage. So writing her is a big treat because she's just going along for the ride and being a princess and making jokes because she can, which is nice. It's nice to write a less complicated, I mean, she's complicated, but a less, like, I guess, taxed character, so to speak. Alex is a bit too chaotic, which is that he is. Like, he's a little too chaotic, but and it's nice. She's fun.
And did you always knew it was going to be a trilogy? Or did it kind of take shape as you started writing and then saw like the volume of what you were writing?
I wrote it as one thing first, and then it was huge. And then I was like, conceptually, isn't this kind of three parts? So I started thinking conceptually, without maybe knowing it. I went through a lot of color imagery in the first part, and then I went through a lot of like symbology and drawing together the patterns in the story. And then the third one, I kind of attempted to wipe it clean. So I was noticing that I was basically employing the process of meaning making across an entire humongous story. And I was like, I'm just going to chop it up because I went to art school and art school says form must meet function. And I'm kind of a painter first. So, and an art teacher. So what I did was just like cut it up and went, okay, so you have three and they all serve their own purpose, but they totally got to be read together.
For real? You want to talk about your writing journey? Because you were saying that, well, you're a freelance writer, but you are now moving to a full-time author.
Yeah, sure. I mean, writing wise, I've always written. It was mostly that thing that I stuck into. Either I'm copywriting for companies and doing emails, writing UX copy for landing pages or blog articles, or it's a hobby. And that hobby took up a whole chunk of time, thousands upon thousands of words written in a group collaborative setting. And I loved that stuff. It was amazing. But I kept the creative writing mostly to myself because there had to be a schism between, writing email drip campaigns for businesses and doing something creative. I branched out into op-eds, being, an old man yelling at clouds. That somehow made freelancing happen. Yeah, no, I wrote a whole article about how the hiring process sucks. And then somehow I got a freelance career out of it, which is not, I had people telling me it's not going to work for you. Like, you're not going to be able to do it. And that's actually what got me like.
But I think anyone writing connects with that on a deep level, because I know very few people who love writing and at the same time don't also hate it. You know what I mean? Like that
Yeah,
it's a struggle. Like, oh, I need to write. I want to write, but I just can't.
I don't know. On my front, the writing for creativity's sake is like breathing. I don't have an issue with it. When I have to write for other people, then that's when I kind of hate doing it
Mhm.
because you're like, I'm trying to fit their goals. For me, I can push out half a novel in a day.
Wow,
And
that's a lot. Yeah.
I write very quickly.
Yeah.
And I'm very into it. But if it's for other people, that's when I have a challenge.
Mhm.
It's, you want me to write what? Like, why do I care about this?
Yeah.
So, yes, that's hard.
I've worked as a freelance writer. I mean, I still do for Book Riot, but I did also on websites online, and I ended up stopping because I realized that basically what I was being paid was not worth how much trouble I got, because it took me a long time to write for other people and to find the voice they wanted me to have for their articles or copy or whatever. So yeah, I totally get that.
Definitely, definitely. Like, you have to research the brand if they don't have a brand document, and
Yeah.
researching stuff that's maybe way outside what you're used to.
Yeah. And what about your story with sci-fi?
I'm just a weeb. Like, I'm just an anime nerd. So all that stuff comes from like watching Akira and Ghost in the Shell on Sci-Fi Channel on Sundays and being obsessed with Satoshi Kon and diving headfirst into literally any cyberpunk anime I can get my hands on. Then it was Star Trek and Farscape and a bit of Buffy, even though it's fantasy. And I'm just a nerd. Like, science fiction, it to me is just that fun genre that talks about big things, but also can be really goofy and really silly, which I appreciate it for. I'm also a big fan of the film Brazil, and absurdist science fiction is great. Cyberpunk, obviously. Yeah, it's just my favorite genre because it's almost magic sometimes. It can be fantasy sometimes, but it can also be, very technical, or it can be goofy. And I like that variability personally.
Yeah, because there are a lot of subgenres in sci-fi. Like I usually say, oh, I don't read a lot of sci-fi or fantasy, but then there I am reading dystopian novels. That's sci-fi. That fall. I mean, of
Yeah.
course, yeah, it can be so.
Yeah, that's sci-fi. And some fantasy is even kind of sci-fi.
Yeah,
Like, there's a lot of bleeding across genres. If there's even a vague like technical part of something, it ends up being a little science fiction. It doesn't just have to kind of be aliens. Yeah, it can be dystopic stuff. It can
yeah.
be, you know, post-apocalyptic. It can even be something like there is a vague threat that is maybe science-y related, and that could potentially be in the science fiction territory.
You mentioned before that painting was how you started. So like you went to art school, and you also created the art that accompanies Constelis Voss, even though it is a novel and not a graphic novel. You used to be a painter. Is this something you still do? Because I'm really interested in knowing about any ways in which you create art and what your path from being a painter and then becoming an illustrator.
Yeah, sure. I mean, I had way back when, kind of around maybe the birth of Tumblr, because that's when, the art space kicked off. I was part of a very prominent pop surrealist kind of anime-esque art movement. I had shows all over the world. I had shows in Germany, France, Japan, I think even one in Argentina. But, I went to art school, did all that, had my pop surrealism phase, my oil painting, my very loud feminist work phase, but always anime inspired. And then I like went into the art field with my peers, and I had to kind of like navigate the client creator relationship in a way that made me uncomfortable, because to me, the art market's weird. Like, people will just place value on something and it's incredibly subjective. So I just was super uncomfortable, hanging out with business people and being like, yeah, pay me bajillions of dollars, because I didn't really understand the like, why do I need to convince anyone to do this? So then I somehow went into freelancing, and that bullheaded attitude of, why do I have to convince you? Like, just pay me or go home, worked for me. But that doesn't work in the art world. Like, just being I mean, maybe it's just because you know, I'm perceived as a woman. There's potentially some type of misogyny in there that I don't know about, but I didn't like it. So I went from that, and then freelance, and then writing. And yeah, I'm still a painter. I'm still an artist. I've mostly taken to making three-dimensional renders and animating them, making music videos, doing art for the cast. To me, the difference between the paintings that I made and the stories that I write, they're not that different. They're both fairly metaphysical, surreal, and deal a lot in symbology. So to me, it was just jumping from one to the other. And yeah, I do the illustrations for all of it, like everything relating to Constelis Voss, all of it. And I love doing that. But it's also this idea of I'm not yet skilled enough to make an animation, or I would have probably just done that too. And maybe I will in the future. The technology is a little out of my purview. Like, I'm not going to sit there slapping my hands on the keys in Blender. It's a little above me. But to me, all these things still relate to one another. You know, you paint with words and symbols, and you paint with symbols and ink. It's not that big of a stretch. And it's a broader look at an inner universe that maybe a snapshot of a painting can't quite give you.
Did the characters come to you first as the animation or with words on the page?
Do you mean, do I like make their art first and then write them?
Yeah.
I mean, they kind of come to me in daydreaming, and then I will write them. But I think it's important while I'm writing them to create what they look like, because, you know, some people are kind of, some writers are okay with things being open to interpretation. I'm like, nah, I know what they look like. Like, I better get them out there, because I'm not going to have somebody, you know, misunderstand what I've created. It's tied together. It's the image, the word, and also music. Everything kind of congeal together. And how am I creating a person that's not real? And what do they feel, think, look, act, and write like? Or I kind of don't think that if you don't, like, I think if you don't know your characters to the point of like being able to breathe them through various media, like I know what they look like, then you might not know them enough to write them convincingly.
And is there any, I don't know if this is going to sound a bit unfair, but is there any reason why you decided to go more for a novel instead of a graphic novel, since you like both mediums so much? Because, you know, of course, authors can write and not be able to paint or draw or anything. Is that something you would like to do maybe in the future?
Yeah. I mean, one of the reasons I've rendered these characters in 3D is I can make a graphic novel and I don't have to draw the panels. The real answer, I like writing. Like, I like the articulation of playing with language. I love linguistics. I love it. So I prefer to just write. I do like graphic novels, but also I have the executive functioning of a gnat. So me sitting there and like drawing all the panels, I can't, like, I know I can't do that. Like, I know I can't. So I had to find a way through technology to do it. Like, eventually this will probably have graphic novel parts to it. Eventually I'll probably make a pilot with 3D animated characters for, like, you know, yell at Netflix to throw me a bone. But I do just like writing, and that's the easiest thing for me. Just, you know, put your fingers on the keys. You don't even need a keyboard. Like, you get a piece of paper, you get a pen, you have a way to make a universe. So yeah, I can't. I'm not as talented. I'm not talented enough to draw the comic panels. I'm sorry.
That's so hard to believe when you go into the website and you have all these characters and they're detailed, you know what I mean? Because like I saw them on the website, and it was my first impression, because I first saw the website and then got the book, was, oh, this is going to be a graphic novel or some comics or of some sort, because there's so much art on the website and it's so interesting to see. Then you have a whole novel and then you have those characters. It's which very often don't happen, you know what I mean? Like, very often you have the novel and that's that, and then you have fan art of the characters, but not made from not the actual characters drawn by the author. So that's why I was very surprised when I realized, oh, it is not. But like the characters are, yeah, they're filled with details.
Yeah, it's literally just like I have to do the novelty thing. If I have to draw the same type of frames over and over again, my spoons are gonna bottom out and I'm gonna
Yeah.
start like screaming. Writing allows me the ability to focus in a way that like drawing doesn't. I love painting, I love drawing, and I probably could do it if I could focus, but it's a little, I don't know. You can always play with language. I have a problem when stuff is just the same too often. And
Yeah.
that's like animation and comics. It's too hard for me.
Yeah. No, I like totally there's no like I said, that's why I didn't want to sound unfair.
Oh, it's not
But
unfair.
I was
I've
really surprised that there was so much art when it's a novel.
Yeah, no, it's not unfair. I've had a lot of people ask like, "Hey, are you going to make a comic book?" And I'm
Yeah.
like, "Oh, geez, you want to make it?" Like it's easy for me to make a painting of their face. It's an easy for me when I'm feeling the emotions.
Yeah.
I tap into that creative vibe, be like, I'm just gonna, crap out a painting of Diana. I can't hold on to that long enough in visual form to chase a comic. And I don't know, in some way, maybe I'm trying to make a bunch of supplemental material to solidify these characters into the universe as being larger than just a series of novels, because I have a whole multiverse metaverse planned and I will chase that until I cannot chase it anymore.
Very well. I'd also like to hear your take on the LGBTQ IAP plus representation and bisexual erasure. How do you see those things in literature as a bisexual, gender non-conforming trans man?
It's difficult. I see, and it's a bit of a broad question. Bisexual erasure is a huge problem. It's challenging to be a bi trans dude and look out into the landscape of media, literature, and reader communities. And even in recent memory, I haven't even seen the Loki TV show, but like a lot of fandom people are talking about how that's not the bi rep they wanted. And I'm like, but they're both bi. Like both characters in that show are bi. Like whoever, it's like Loki and Sylvie or whatever. So I see this and I'm like, but they're bi though. And that erasure is so predominant and so prevalent. And it's very big in the LGBTQ plus community. And when you talk about it, it's almost considered like sit down, the real oppressed people are talking. And I think that's incredibly disrespectful. Bisexual people are just as queer as everybody else. On the trans front, the trans guy front, I think that there's broad acceptance. At the same time, there's also tons of transphobia even inside of the community itself. So I don't know if I can really encapsulate an answer or a response or a feeling to this question accurately, except I think that potentially the queer community at large needs to stop with the infighting. And I think it makes it difficult for authors, artists, anyone making work or experiencing media to find themselves in media when you have, I guess, the community and the broader social monoculture trying to dictate what the queer experience is in just one bullet point, and that's not real. So yeah, I want to get to open representation across the board where, you can have your, pardon my French, maybe you have to blur, like slutty bisexual character. Like you can have your queer villains. You can do risky stuff without it being an entire reflection on a community. Because even if you want to be respectful, there are people who are going to resonate with the queer characters that other people might not. So it's kind of difficult to be told, that the queer community doesn't treat itself like a monolith, but it wants to operate as though queer media is monolithic. It's very strange for me, and it bothers me, and it makes me mad. Then we get the monoculture being like, yeah, we totally helped. We super duper duper love queer people. And then when like Pride Month goes away, all the rainbow stuff leaves and they don't care. Like, it's very obvious they don't care. So yeah, it's a hard space to be in. I don't quite know if I'm answering your question accurately.
No,
I could fill up
for
several
sure.
podcasts talking about the politics of being queer because it is political. And I would very much like to get to the point where we are afforded the same graces as cishet people, basically.
There was actually a controversy, I think, in some young adult community just last week, I think, about someone who reviewed a book that has queer representation, saying that doesn't, because the main character, or one of the main characters, even though they're bi, they're in a relationship with, like, she's a girl and they're in a relationship with a man. Therefore, they bought that book for nothing because there's no
Yes.
queer representation. And it's like, there's literally, it says on the book that the main character is bi. It's not like the author came to tell afterwards, oh no, the main character is bi. No, it's there, it's stated there. Like, them being in a relationship with a man does not change that.
Exactly. I actually saw that too. And I wrote an article pertaining to that and hegemonic narrative structures in the publishing industry. It's floating around somewhere on my website. Yeah, I saw that and it bothers me because we don't need to do this crabs in a bucket mentality. And just because someone may be a character or a person may be in a relationship with an opposite gender partner, that doesn't make them less queer. And when we say stuff like that, we're just trying to claw at the top of the pile and be like, but this is really queer. No, queerness doesn't look one way. Queerness doesn't act one way. So yeah, it's deeply insulting, frustrating, juvenile. And I try very much not to be aggro in everybody's direction about bi erasure, but I kind of just am because, gosh, imagine thinking that someone is basically, or someone or a character is basically just straight because of the person they may be dating at the time. Like, that's so juvenile.
Not to mention that people can be like in a straight relationship in what you say, like the opposite gender, and still be asexual. And being asexual is still in the part of the LGBTQI community.
People completely forget about, the ace arrow community too. I've even asked online, I'm like, do you guys know that like straight people are part of the LGBT community? Like, did you forget that some people like are like, where are the electrons rubbing together? Like, do we know what all these acronyms mean, or you're just pretending that you know what they mean? Yeah, it's frustrating. I don't want to rant about it forever because I'm just going to devolve into like feral screaming. It's super frustrating. Like, I'm 33, I'm a geriatric millennial. And I'm like, can we someone called us that, so I'm just going to use it. Yeah, someone called us up, I'm going to use it. Old man yelling at clouds. So like, I just really want us to get to the point where like we could talk about class issues, which is what Constelis Voss is a lot about, and like stop trying to use stop projecting rage and making hierarchies. Like, stop reproducing classist hierarchies inside of marginalized communities. That is not the way we should be doing this. If we're going to change the world and make it a better place and, help more marginalized people across the board, not just queer people, we can't just reproduce the class structure inside of community groups. That's bad. That's not what we're supposed to be doing. And yet we are doing it, which is deeply frustrating because real life people are suffering real consequences from the meaning making that people project into various media properties. Like, that type of sentiment, like, that's not the queer rep that I wanted, or it's not even queer rep, but I wasted my time. That sentiment actually impacts real people.
Of course, definitely. You also talked before about, you were talking about Tumblr and then cliches and tropes. Do you want to go a little bit into that? Like, do you enjoy them?
Yes.
Do you think...
Sorry.
No, I was just basically going to to kind of bring also the situation with when people say that certain cliches are tropes. No, I'm not saying no. It's not trope. How do you pronounce
A
it?
trope.
Trope, a trope. It's not the first time I say a trope because, you know, I usually read it, I don't hear it, but a trope. And people say it's overused, but then again, you have the queer community and nothing is overused.
Exactly. Nothing is overused. I mean, some stuff is like bury your gaze is so tired.
The what? Say it
The
again.
bury your gaze trope, sorry. The bury your gaze trope, you know, is so tired of like a queer character is killed off for maximum emotional impact. You know what I
okay.
mean?
Yeah.
That one's overused, but you're exactly right. I don't necessarily love tropes. I love the idea of being told I can't do something and then trying to figure out how to do it. Because I'm, you know, I'm by chaos. I just have to figure it out. So I'm also of the Stuart Hall camp. If you're familiar with a cultural theorist, you know,
No.
90s dude, you know, rest in power, he was great. Of open representation is where we want to get. The only way to interrogate and wrestle meaning making from a stereotype or trope, in my eyes, is to use it, subvert it, sit inside of it, and change the meaning of it completely. Like I'm in that camp of, yeah, okay, I'll make the slutty bisexual, and then that will not be true at all. Like you'll read a story and be like, oh, actually, that's not what they're all about. You'll get a femme fatale, for instance, and be like, yeah, you know, they're just weaponizing sex against people. Oh, one-dimensional character. And that's Diana. And Diana ends up being the most maternal, kind, giving, warm, loving, understanding character basically on the cast. I like tropes insofar as I like to see what I can kind of get away with and what I can critique while using them. I think avoiding them for the sake of potentially, you know, sanitizing or reducing the problematic elements has a tendency to reaffix a trope or a stereotype onto a character by merit of avoiding it. It is yet again another box, and I think we have to be very careful about tokenizing the character's rewrite because something might be messy or inconvenient about a character rewrite, but that's real people. You know, like you're going to have a character like Alex who has extreme mental health issues and PTSD for a lot of good reasons. And the way he acts may not be the most convenient to like a shining example of a queer superhero, more or less. Like Alex is not a role model, but he's necessary. And I think we still need to have characters that are messy, inconvenient, difficult, contradictory, even tropey, to be able to push apart this meaning making. I'm more concerned about, you know, not necessarily using tropes and stereotypes and stuff like that. I'm concerned about why we don't critique the society that weaponized these traits to begin with. Because, as I said before, very much I'm about the meaning making in literature, how literature can both be, or art can both be a mirror or a locus or a meaning maker. So I think that it's good. Like, I think use tropes to understand them, use them to do something new, try to retool the execution. Don't just use them because they're easy. That's like lazy writing. But you can change the meaning of something. You can wrestle back a stereotype. You know, that's kind of what some reclamation is about. Like the word queer used to be a slur. You can wrestle back the meaning of something. If we're not allowed to do that, then no actual progress in my mind happens because we end up just ignoring the problem as contingent, which is a monoculture exerting pressure and force onto humans, art, characters, writing, literature, all of that, and saying, this is what this means, but that's not real. And we can change that if we let ourselves, basically. I hope that makes sense.
No, yeah. And I mean, if you make all your characters queer, you obviously have to have problematic ones.
Yes.
And there are going to be problematic queers as there are cis, you know, and non-queer people that are problematic in books. Like I don't see every single woman in a book as me. There are going to be women that are problematic and others that are not. And that's fine because it's real life.
Yes, exactly. It's also one of the reasons, well, I mean, I tend to not write characters that aren't bi because it's, my hang up of being like, I don't know how to just be one way. I'm sorry. Um, but yeah, if all the characters are queer, if they're all bi and, they have maybe different gender identity things going on, or they have different leans. If they're all bi, you're obviously going to get some of them that are just like messy and difficult. And you're right. Like, I don't read dude characters and be like, they need to do what I want to do. Like, I think we have to allow stuff to be different from ourselves and go, what can I learn about that? Maybe I can learn about something about myself. Maybe I can empathize with someone not like me. And that's also a goal of Constelis Voss is empathy. These characters are very difficult, complicated, messy characters. And I hope that I can challenge preconceptions of their tropes because they are written to be tropes. Diana's the femme fatale, like Alex is the queer villain turned hero. Maya is the manic pixie dream girl. They all have their own tropes. My hope is that potentially by interrogating these tropes and showing that these characters are a lot messier, more complicated, earnest than first assumed, maybe people reading the series can get empathy for others and also not stick real people into a box. And maybe that's kind of a Nutter Barter's idea, but I just really want people to stop making stuff black and white and simple and start accepting the variability of what it means to be a person.
Yeah. And you have the trope, but the people are more than just the trope that they are. And yes, the characters definitely, they can have that identity and a lot other identities at the same time.
Yeah, because that's how people are.
You are also quite active on social media. You even have a TikTok account. Do you think that websites like Tumblr and now TikTok as well are in some ways or have in some ways helped the queer community find a space to express themselves?
I do. The difficulty is actually wrestling at the platform level. So I was pretty big on Tumblr for a really long time. And then Tumblr did that kibosh and they were like, we're going to get rid. Yeah.
What happened? Because no, I was on Tumblr, I think from actually most of the social justice that I've learned from Tumblr, and I'm forever grateful for that because I was really not aware of a lot of stuff before. But I was from Tumblr on Tumblr from 2012 to 2016 or 15 even. So after that, I haven't been on the website, so I have no idea. I was really involved and then I just stopped.
Yeah, so Tumblr had this big kibosh on it said it was going to get rid of adult content because there was bad stuff going on. And I was like, okay, bad stuff going on, that's really bad. Then Tumblr got rid of a bunch of not safe for work artists and a bunch of queer artists because there's a big overlap between the more adult creativity in the queer community. And essentially Tumblr just went, hey, my user base. And the users were like, what are you doing? And Tumblr just
so much fun
shot
art.
themselves in the foot. Just straight up just ruined everything. There was a problem. They didn't handle it effectively. And instead they just did a blanket ban. So TikTok has the same issue where every couple days, if you're posting something and you're using queer hashtags, like hashtag queer TikTok, hashtag trans man, something, anything. Every couple days, they nuke the amount of posts in that hashtag and they kind of scrub the popularity. They don't necessarily scrub the posts, but they give you the illusion that those hashtags aren't being used.
So they are they are
censoring queer voices
immediately with sexuality or being sexual?
No, it has nothing to do with being sexual. It's just queer hashtags and queer posts end up getting, for lack of a better term, I guess, shadow banned.
But that's what I'm saying. They are basically immediately connecting something queer or from the LGBTQI plus community as something inherently sexual, even when it's not. Wow.
Yep. Yeah, even when it's not. So every platform tends to do this. It kind of ends up doing it. And I've been watching it since the start of social media platforms to begin with. So these are good spaces. And there is a big pushback on TikTok to trying to reclaim some of that ground. But yeah, I mean, marginalized communities at large get over sexualized in general. So a lot of these platforms go, well, we don't want sexual content on here. and they make that link together, even with just maybe a video of some random trans kid talking about their day, to be honest. So
Wow.
yeah, it's a big issue. Not to mention, like, kicking out sex workers from every single corner of the web is really not a safe thing to do. So yeah, I mean, I don't know if I'm answering this the most positively. I am saying, I guess, there's very much a space right now. TikTok is like big for queer youth and the queer community.
Hmm.
The platform is making it hard, if that answers
Okay.
the question.
Yeah, no, it definitely does, because, like I said, the first time I saw so many posts about social media and sorry, social justice, and where I've learned so many things and actually had contact with the queer community, more closely and in a broader sense, was really on Tumblr. And then I kind of noticed the same thing on TikTok, which I think, I mean, it's really nice. And I had no idea about that. I had no idea that they were actually censoring those hashtags and those posts. And I do remember that a lot of fan art on Tumblr was, it could be sexual, sometimes very graphic, but not all of it was it. Um,
Yes,
and
not
if
all
you
of it
have
was.
a kid, you have to control what they see, and you can totally block hashtags yourself. So yeah.
I don't want to go the whole thing, but it's basically platforms being like, we want to be publishers, but we don't want to be publishers. We want all of the benefits of having user generated content, but we want none of the responsibility. And also, parents don't want to parent their kids. Like, it's a
Yeah.
much broader, deeper conversation about how tech works, because I'm a freelancer in tech, and it's ooh, let's just say ooh.
Okay, back to the novels. I know, no, not back to the novels, because I already asked this question. I was going to ask when the sequel to Constelis Voss is coming out, but
Yeah, it
the
comes.
next one is tomorrow, right?
Yeah,
It
it
will
comes
be out.
tomorrow.
It will be out by the time this podcast episode is out.
Yay!
And the next one, the third, which ends the trilogy for now, right?
Yes, it ends the trilogy for now. We're thinking late August, early September. Like, we're going pretty quick with it because they're all done. They just
Yeah.
need editing, formatting.
Great. So we can keep this on my Instagram account. Actually, that's the best place. So I will share that. Are you also working on anything else, writing or otherwise, at the moment?
I'm creating right now a sort of, I guess, prequel, spin-off, tertiary, where I do, because I'm giving myself a challenge. I'm going to do the backstory of all the characters from their like 90s, 80s lives, but it's going to be first person present tense, which is hard. I never write in first person present. It's always third person past, like omniscient.
Yeah.
So I'm going to get really into the characters' heads and have just solo explorations where all seven of them get a chance to shine. Alex's first is because he's easiest. He's just super easy. I mean, he's mentally taxing, but he's easy to write. So I only have like 10 more chapters of his and I'm done. And yeah, they're going to be 7 of them. I'm just going to work on them while I push out Constelis Voss, the main trilogy. And then I might write them all in an isekai side story, like they fell into a fantasy universe, and what do a bunch of superpowered robots do in a fantasy universe? Like comedy, probably. So yeah, I have a lot of plans.
That's super cool that you're actually giving people a glimpse of each character from their own perspective.
Yes, because a lot of Constelis Voss is, I'm not going to spoil this, told from the perspective interpretation of one person, their idea of who these characters are. So the backstories are actually probably going to be much more different because it's told from their point of view. And some of those backstories are going to have crossovers where there will be a couple, not a ton, a couple of past events, a couple of events where every character will feel different about the event that happened, because I think it's important in life to show that your perspective of events may be different, that it may be subjective.
Yeah.
And I think that's important, meaningful work to creating something about perspectives between different people.
That is super interesting because there is this theory about like lies and truth and how two people maybe actually telling their own truth even though the stories seem like a lie, or one of the stories seems like a lie because it's
Yeah.
your perspective of what happened.
Yeah, it's we have objective reality. We
Yeah.
have subjective realities, and they're colored by, our personalities, our experiences, our memories, our interests. It's hard to actually measure objective reality because we're humans and we come with our own biases when we take in information. So I like writing about that. And Constelis Voss mainline trilogy definitely talks about it. But the backstories are definitely going to be another look into exactly that, like which is a lie, which is a truth, what really happened, because everybody has their own inner universe. We're just interpreting what we're
Hmm.
seeing and hearing.
Yeah.
That's like how the brain works.
Do you think entertainment and art can change the world?
Absolutely. Absolutely. 100%. Yeah, art changed my life. I know plenty of musical artists have changed people's lives, saved their lives. I know people who have gone on to make absolutely bonkers beautiful work inspired by a TV show that they loved. I think that if more people actually took away the meaning making that artists try to give, writers try to give, musicians try to give, like we talked earlier, where they're like, I don't like politics in it. If you actually sat with it for a second, maybe the world could be better. And maybe that's a naive, like, I'm okay if that's naive, but yeah, art and media can absolutely change the world. I think we just have to let it.
I agree. Kira, where can people find you online?
I mean, if you Google Kira Leah, I'm literally all over the place, but as per our website, we have constelisvoss.ml, which is CONSTELISVOSS.ml. I'm all over the internet. TikTok, the handle is Windows 95 robot. Instagram is Windows 95 calculator. I'm on LinkedIn, Twitter. I'm everywhere. I have like 2 Facebook accounts. It's getting a little out of hand, but yeah, if you look up KIRALEIGH or anything relating to Constelis Voss, you will find me.
I will put the links on the show's notes so people can find you.
Thank
Uh,
you.
Now, this is the last question of the podcast. An all time favorite book and a book you would recommend right now.
Sure. All-time favorite book is Crime and Punishment by Dostoyevsky, and one I would recommend right now, probably all of the Raven Cycle. I can't pronounce the author's last name, so we're just gonna call her Maggie. I'm sorry. That's one of the few young adult novels, like series, I'm super into. The Raven Cycle is pretty dank.
Do you want to talk also about Crime and Punishment? Why do you recommend it?
Oh man, I mean, I could go on too long. I really like thick Russian prose. I just really like Russian literature. I think that in comparison to a lot of, I guess, English as a first language or predominantly American literature, Russian literature is just like, I'm going to do this thing because I feel like it. Like the rules feel completely different. It's a whole other way to write inside of a canon. And it's interesting because a lot of those authors actually translated their own stuff. So I read Crime and Punishment. I read it when I was like high school. And it acts as a two-parter inside of one story where, like, I think his name is Razumihin. It's been a really Raskolnikov. It's been a long time since I've read it. And the whole first half of it is the crime. Like, I'm the Ubermensch. Can I get away with it? And it's really thick and like really meaty and a lot of like Russian intelligentsia sufferings. That was like Dostoevsky's thing. Then the second half of it is like his own conscience punishing him. I love that. I love that it's a two-parter inside of one story. And the form makes the function. Like it prickles that part of that artist's brain in my skull where I'm like, form function, yes, we're gonna do it. And I get excited because I think playing around with the formative words, playing around with how novels act, using the confines or constructs of a piece of media to make a comment, to make commentary is freaking rad. And that's why Constelis Voss is basically one story with 3 parts because I think it's awesome. And I don't want to go on forever about Crime Punishment because I need coffee and I'm going to start making absolutely 0 sense. I
You
am.
don't
I'm
have
gonna make
to.
no sense.
You don't have. I just wanted you to go a little bit into it, just so we know why you recommend it. So, thank you so much for coming to the podcast.
Thank you too. Thanks for having me.
You can access today's show's notes via my pod page, which you can find along with all of my social media links at linktree/Karine Pereira. In there, you'll also find a link to a Story of Sorts playlist available on Libro FM, containing the audiobooks recommended by our guests, which will be updated as the show progresses. If you'd like to give Libro FM a try, you can use the code A Story of Sorts at checkout to get 2 books for the price of 1. This offer is valid for new Libro FM members in the US and Canada. Libro FM is an audiobook platform which allows you to buy audiobooks directly from an indie bookstore. Check them out. If you have enjoyed this episode, please consider supporting A Story of Sorts on Patreon. Patreon is a platform which allows you to contribute monthly to the podcast in exchange for extra content, such as early access to episodes, a shout out at the end of an episode and on Instagram, and choosing a theme for me to talk about on the podcast. You can become a patron at patreon.com/A Story of Sorts. I'd also be very grateful if you would simply leave a review and subscribe on your podcast platform of choice. As usual, I'll be back in 2 weeks with a new interview, but before that, I will be dropping an episode with the books I have read last month. I'll talk to you then, and thank you for listening.